Hello everyone, in today's video we're going to get started on a brief series on the Airbus A320. Now we've done some videos on this a while ago, and there's a bunch more, but hey, I figured it might be worthwhile to go ahead and kind of continue it. Now the Airbus is very similar to the Boeing, especially this particular size, kind of that Boeing 737-600-700 sort of range. There's actually bigger versions of this. You have the Airbus 321, and of course then you have the little micro machine version, the Airbus A318 as well. This is a pretty neat airplane, and it's got some major philosophical differences of its design as well as kind of how you fly it that we're going to be exploring today, kind of going from the sort of walking you through everything all the way through getting it down on the ground nice and safely. If you're curious where we are, we're at BWI Airport. The reason I chose this particular parking spot, let me go spin around real quickly, is because you can't actually back an airplane around, start your engines. You have to actually be backed out all the way to this position before you can actually get out of here. I was here fairly recently, and it was one of those things I'm like, well, that was a thing, but let's get started. So climbing into the Airbus, a bunch of things we notice are a big difference here. First of all, I'm going to look down. You'll notice there's no yoke here. Just don't do that. Instead, we have a little side stick that's sort of chilling here on the side. Now, the cool thing about this little side stick here that you don't get to see is the fact that this stick is really, really hard to move. Now, I got the opportunity to check out an Airbus A320, and one of my buddies actually got to get some time on a simulator for one. And his comment and my comment was identical, that getting this thing to move, it's like moving a yoke. This is not like, whee, like I'm doing right now. You could probably do that, but it wouldn't go well for you. But the important thing to know about it is that when I pull back on the stick, I'm not actually basically pulling back on the controls or anything like that. Obviously, we have no power. But what you're actually doing is you're telling a computer on board to interpret what this means as far as a change in pitch. What you're actually doing is you're ordering up certain G-forces. Give me a 2 G-force pull-up. Give me a 2 G-force. It wouldn't be that much. It would be 1.5. And one of the things they have is what they call control laws, which are basically going to be how this gets interpreted, plus the rest of the performance of the aircraft. Other things you're going to notice climbing in this one, of course, is looking in front of you. We've got our lovely little displays. We have a massive central console here, which has got a million little buttons. There's our CDU. We have a little device up here, which actually allows us to receive messages in flight on your ACARs. It's actually pretty cool tech. Looking down at our throttle right here, looks a little different. There's no big handles. There's nothing big chunky in the front. If I kind of float around here and I'll kind of come down here sort of a piece and look at these buttons, you'll see that, of course, we've got a little shutdown options there. But you'll also notice coming on the side, it's not like we have like 30%, 40%. We have modes of thrust listed on the side here as opposed to specific thrusts. This is also the same philosophy as our little stick on the left there. On a stick on the left, give me a 3 Gs to the left kind of a thing. I would do that in this plane, please. This one's the same idea. Go ahead and give me my climb thrust, please. Go ahead and give me my max continuous thrust. Give me my takeoff go around thrust just by clicking it into these little notches here. Now, depending on how your actual joystick is set up, it can be a little challenging to get this set up. One thing that you got to watch out for is, for me, I have a D10 on my joystick for fighters. My D10 is right here, which is actually outside of the critical one you actually want. You want it to be able to kind of set here. The good news with this throttle is all modes are displayed, and we'll take a look at that once we get some power coming to this thing. You'll also notice with my reverse option here that these little flippers get popped up, and then, of course, you can jam it to full reverse, and it can release the little flippers, and then you go ahead and drop it down. You're going to want to make sure you have a button bound for that because this thing needs a lot of room to slow down. So after the screens, of course, coming down to the middle here, we have all the usual components for that. Looking up above our heads, we have a slightly different overhead panel than you're probably recognizing from what we had over in any of the Boeing aircraft. You'll notice we have a lot more flat buttons, and we only have a couple switches here. The general philosophy of Airbus, if you're not starting to see the pattern here, is we just shouldn't have to touch it after you set it kind of a thing. So why bother making it something that you could wear out like a switch? So what you'll see on an Airbus is whenever something needs to be pushed, it'll actually change color for the light. And if something doesn't need to be pushed, it'll let you know. So for example now, if I stick my head up here, you'll notice all my switches are dull, except for exactly one switch, which says external power. Now the cool thing here is if I reach up here and actually click this button, you'll notice this thing immediately flips on, we get lights, and you'll notice there's tons of new lights that come on. And each one of these lights actually has a different thing that it's telling us. You'll notice, for example, we have our fuel pumps here. They have a white box underneath them, which is simply telling us basically an advisory. Hey, just so you know, the plane's not going to crash, but you don't have the fuel pumps on, just so you know. Coming down here, same thing with my batteries. My 2 batteries are set to the off position. If you're wondering why, by the way, that we have any juice, it's because, again, we're running the external power here. But you'll also notice things that are broken have turned themselves kind of this reddish pinkish color. If I come over here and click on this button, I'll take the generator offline, to which it says, hey, just so you know, you shut your generator off. But now if I click it again, it's going to say there's a fault. Now you're wondering why there's a fault. my engines aren't turning, chief. So that's why there's a fault right now. Now, when you come down here, you'll notice a bunch of other buttons that all have no lights on them at all. Let's say, oh, APU bleed. That sounds important. Let me click it. You'll notice that this one turns blue. And if I come over to engine bleeds, they turn to the off position. Remember, if there's a light, it's trying to tell you something. So in this case, it's telling me I'm not bleeding anything off my engines. And this one is giving me a heads up saying, did you intend to be having the APU bleed right now? And it's just kind of a neat little way that, again, different philosophy on these type of aircraft. We're actually going to need that in a minute, but we'll get there in a moment. Now, if I zoom my head out the rest of the way, you'll notice we have no other lights on right now. Unless, of course, I reach up and tap something and I come up to my flight, shut that one off. It's going to turn white to get you a heads up to say, hey, there's something on. But if it's in the position it needs to be in, that light will actually go out. Now, that philosophy of, like I said, just sort of general approach is the same thing with our mode control panel sitting up here in the middle. You'll notice that this doesn't look like what we're used to having in a lot of aircraft. For example, if you come here in the middle, you're like, well, where's my flight director button? Well, it's in the usual spots. Oh, what am I ILS? Oh, it's the ILS display if you need it. But you'll notice that all of these buttons here are actually combined use buttons. And they have another unique quirk to them. And that's the fact that instead of having a separate button to select what mode, manipulating the switch is what's going to be changing the mode of our particular aircraft. So in this particular case, for example, if I want the computer, the FMS, to do it, see I have a little vertical arrow there, I'd click, and you can see the button gets pushed in. That's simply saying, all right, use whatever the computer needs at this time. Now, if I come to the bottom half, do you see how I have a down vertical arrow? If I click it, I'm pulling it out, saying, no, 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 no. I want to do this now. Let me manually override it. So in this case, if we wanted to set a specific speed here, again, I don't know why we'd have a speed of 50, but there's nothing stopping us from doing it. You can click and hold, by the way. It gets you going pretty good. So now if I wanted to, for example, they say hold 210 or something like that, I can come in here, pull that out, as long as my auto throttle is enabled, set this to 210, for example. I'll just put it at 180, just to keep, otherwise we're going to be clicking for a while. Now, the moment they say proceed on course or do whatever, I just come up here and press the vertical arrow to basically say, hey, here you go. Now, one of the neat things here is all these systems are context smart and sensitive. They know, for example, I have no computer speed. So when I try to push that thing back in, nothing's going to happen because it doesn't know what it's supposed to do. Likewise with my heading here, if I push this in, there's no programmed heading. If I pull it out, it'll let me dial in a specific heading. And if I push it in, do you see how it's not doing anything? It's because it doesn't have anything to do. So basically what I did is say, hey, give me this heading kind of deal. So now if I went over to 250, for example, and I push it in, you'll notice it's not like it switches modes or anything. The most critical components you'll actually know is you see, however, our lock button and our approach button all have separate independent buttons outside of these other options that we have here because of how incredibly important they are. They also have a little light at the top that's going to notify you that you've activated that particular setting. Now, another interesting thing which I always get a kick out of here is our little altitude controller. You'll notice it has two different modes itself. You'll notice I can actually come in here and change the selected altitude. Let's say I want to do 10,000 feet here. But you'll also notice I can push this in, basically turning on VNAV, or I can pull it out saying, oh, no, this is what I want, kind of a deal like that. And again, by pulling it out, you have your selected versus your level off right now modes just by pressing a button. The one over here on the right is the same way with my vertical speed control. You'll notice if I just start wheeling it, I start getting a vertical speed number. If I push it in, it's going to zero that out. And if I pull it out, it's going to switch back to that mode. So in a way, you're saying, no, you can set it. No, let me set it, kind of a thing like that. And that philosophy is going to be continuing throughout everything that we see in this aircraft. So I'll go ahead and I'll leave that alone. I've goofed my mode control panel up ridiculous now. So again, that's going to be sort of a piece now. Now, when we first set inside this aircraft, generally what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to get your APU going. Your APU is going to be your little mini engine that sits in the back and works really, really well for the purposes of giving us electricity as well as some compressed air. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come here and press the master switch button. I don't think this is modeled accurate. I don't know how accurately this is actually modeled, but pressing that button should open up the hatch here. And I don't think we're going to see it very well here, but there's actually a little fold that will come down here. And this is the exhaust, by the way, for the APU comes out here. But this little thing will fold open when you press that. Now, when I press start, it's going to actually start and set up all the valves and everything we need to do to actually get that going. Just sort of a little convenience, though, is generally when you're running anything, you kind of let people know that you're running things because obviously you don't want to cause yourself any concern. You don't want somebody going by there with a ladder and get cooked in the face or something like that. So a lot of times what they'll actually do is they'll click on one set of lights so people know that you're running it, and especially if you're running hydraulic pumps. Now, when I press the start button, like I said, I don't think we're going to get to see this here, which is kind of a shame, but the little panel will open up, and all of a sudden what you'll see is a bunch of heat waves will start kind of floating out of this in a few moments as the whole system gets booted up. Now, folks who are familiar with Boeing probably are going, hey, wait a minute, shouldn't we be turning on fuel pumps and stuff like that? Well, because of the way this system is engineered, it will actually connect all the key elements that it needs, and you can actually turn that on later on. Now, notice, by the way, this switch went to the word avail. It's notifying us something. The light's not out. It's telling us the master's on, plus avail means we can now utilize it. So now what we're going to do is we're actually going to activate both of our batteries here. You can see the back on the line. And we're going to actually engage the APU generator. Notice, by the way, by clicking on it, it says it's off. By clicking on it again, it says it's on. So if I shut off the exterior power, external power, the GPU, you can see that now my APU is powering everything that we've got going on here. Now, the other thing we can do is we can actually come here and actually click this switch now, which is going to take pressure out of the APU. Remember, it's a little jet engine. Well, not a jet engine, just a little gas turbine. And what it's going to do is it's actually going to push air into our packs, which are critical. They're the ones that are going to keep us warm or cold. This is the summertime right now. We desperately need these. But now what we can do is we can actually start warming and cooling the rest of the aircraft while that's going. And now we have our own onboard electrical supply as well. The next step you're going to be wanting to do as you get that all operational is you're going to want to make your way down here and start programming the MCDU. This is our handy-dandy display entry unit, and this is what's going to be allowing us to go ahead and start programming the computer for the different flights that we need. Now, this is a very, very different unit than you're probably used to over in Boeing. Boeing has a very much, anytime you want to push a button kind of a thing, whereas this unit is very much, it's my way or it's my way kind of a deal. And you'll see exactly what I mean by that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here, and we're going to press the init button. And what that's going to do is it's going to bring us to that original page. That's going to allow us to go ahead and start dialing in our details. Of course, if you do it, make sure you push this one so that you can see. Now, if you run into this problem where you can't see the display, which is kind of a bummer, again, you can come over here. Normally, you can jack up the brightness really, 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 really high. Again, I'm cranking this as high as I can go so y'all can see this okay. The other solution, of course, is you can change what time of day it is, and that problem goes away real quickly. So what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be setting up our initiation here. There's a lot of different stuff that we can set here. For example, we have our initial positions. You also see where we're coming from and where we're coming to. Now, the way that this keyboard works is basically the same as you're familiar with on other FMSs. You simply type out the letters. If you goof up, you just press the clear button. Simple as that. So right now, we're at BWI. So that's going to be K, a kilo, because we're in the US. I hope if you type this correctly. Whiskey India, please. There we go. It's BWI. Now, see this little slashy thing? This little orange box says it's expecting something. If you ever see an orange box anywhere in the FMS, you're going to want to fill those boxes in. It's an important concept. Anything that's white, it's like it wants it, but it'll deal with it if it doesn't have it kind of a thing. So I'm going to press the slash key, and I'm going to go ahead and type in my destination. We're going up to Bradley International today. Go ahead and click that button. The reason it's going to sit here cooking is because it's going to look to see if it has any saved flight plans here. In this case, there's none. So I can actually press the return button, and it's going to auto-program it. Now, do you notice, remember how these little lights down here were white a second ago? Now, notice they turned orange because they're currently looking for a value for us. It's a great way to do it. Now, cost index, without getting too complicated here, is the ratio of, do I want to burn more gas or do I want to deal with more expensive maintenance? And again, trying to find the balance between that is going to depend on gas prices. A lot of times companies will set this number. For me, I'm super duper lazy, so I'm just going to set 400 because I'm lazy. Again, you can look these numbers up very specifically. Bigger numbers just mean you're going to go faster. Cruise flight level and temperature. We're actually going to be relatively low today, so we're going to be 32,000. Cruise temperature, we don't know. So if you don't know something, you can just leave it clear and then click on it, and it's going to guesstimate that particular value. So in this case, we're flight level 320, which is impossible because we're going up to the east. My bad, 330, my bad. Now you'll notice at the tippy top here, there's this little tiny arrow. Whenever you see one of those arrows, that's going to be letting you know that you have the ability to go ahead and go to the next page. Now, you don't see a next page button here. But what you do see is you see these guys here. So if I actually press the next page button, it'll take you to the next page. Now, the thing you got to watch out for here is next page is also previous page, depending on how far you go, sort of a thing. Now, coming to this page, it gets a little more complicated. One of the things you're going to observe here, you're going to see we have some taxi fuel. We have 0 for trip. You'll notice we have a 0 fuel weight. We also have this lovely thing here that's going to tell us our different pieces. We have a takeoff weight, landing weight, all that's in here. But you see how there's a bunch of blue values here, and there are a bunch of zeros and a bunch of lines. The reason for that is we haven't actually programmed how we're going to be getting to our destination here. That's one of the big differences of this particular unit. We could, of course, say, just going to be this, go, kind of a thing, which is basically what we're going to do. But until that's in here, it's not going to be able to estimate any of these numbers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and head back to the flight plan button. So what you're going to see here is we're coming from UWI, and we're proceeding directly. We're going to decelerate, and then we're going to head to KBD hell. that doesn't do us a lot of good here. So what we want to do is we want to be able to come in here and start putting in the pieces. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press this little soft key, and you'll notice that it's got a bunch of handy-dandy pieces here. One thing you'll see here is we have a new destination, we have the next waypoint option, and of course we have the departure option. So I'm going to go ahead and click departure today. If you take a look at our current situation here, let's see here, it's going to be, I think, what do we have today that's going to be facing eastish? So that's going to be a runway 4 today. Look at a little tiny runway 4 is. It's so tiny. Oh, we'll use runway 10 today. Make it nice and simple. Now you'll notice when I click on that, it's going to give us any instrument departures, which unfortunately we have none. So I can just press none here. And we have two choices here. We can either stick this thing into a temporary flight plan, or we can insert into our current flight plan. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press the soft key next to it. And you'll see now it says KBWI 10, because that is going to be our desired runway for taking off. Now that's useful for us because it's basically going to get us all kind of ready to go, set up. So now if I click on this again, it gives me the opportunity to go ahead and type in any sort of airways I have accessible to me, or I can dial in a specific waypoint that I want to use. So in this case, I'm going to go up to the MXE. This is Mike X-Ray Echo. Click right there. And what's going to happen is nothing's going to happen because this is only for waypoints that are already inside of the computer. So now if I give it a second there, it's going to actually process this. It is in the computer. So of course, there it is right there. And you can see as, all those threads and processors are trying to figure out where the heck is Medina kind of a VOR here. And you can see it's right there. So now it says, are you sure about this? Or do you want to actually stick it in? Now for me, I want to stick it in. So I press the insert button. Now you can see here we have at least one waypoint. We require at least one waypoint if we want to proceed on our route. Now, if we want to stick in another waypoint here, we actually have the ability to do that as well. So I can come in here, of course. You're saying here, well, can we do something like this, like we do on the Boeing? Well, watch what happens. So how are the kids? Good, good. No. They've been quiet. It's summertime. Yep, as you can see, nothing happens. And that's one of the big differences between the two systems. Now, if I went to this and I came in here and said I want to go to Pauling, which is going to be, I think they're out of service right now. I punch that in there now. What it's going to do is it's going to sit there and think about its life choices. It's going to say, which one did you mean? I said, Northern Hemisphere, please. It's going to do the same process we had, temporary insert, and just like that, now we have our two waypoints here. Medina and, of course, Pauling, which is kind of an Eastern New York kind of a thing. Then you have decel, and, of course, you have So now we're going to go ahead and select all the good stuff for us getting back on the ground. So if I come here, you'll notice there's an arrival button up at the top. And again, we need to know these things before we fly. So a bunch of runways, basically Southwest. Welcome to Connecticut. That's what it does. And we have Deer Park 3. We have Stella 1. We're going to be using definitely Stella 1 today because it's easy. We're going to go ahead and click on that. It's going to sit there and go, are you sure about that? It's going to say, did you want to transition? No, I don't need that. It's going to give us where do you want to do to get us on the ground? I'm going to use Kibby. Kibby's pretty darn easy. And of course, we have all of our transitions. I'm not going to pick a transition. The reason being is we don't need to. There's ILS for 24. It's already selected. By a Searle star, it's going to be Stella 1, and no transition today. I press the insert key. Voila. And now we have everything pre-programmed. You can see BWI 10, Modena. We can see Pauling. We can see Albany, which is, whoa, that's not correct. Oh, let's go fix that. ILS 24. Let's go back to the star here. ILS 24. What the heck was that? Why did it think that? If you ever run into a situation where you can't find what you're looking for, you can always use these buttons to kind of surf between the different options. If they're not available, of course, there's no other pages. You can go switch these. We have Albany or Auto kind of a thing like that. I guess I'll take none kind of a thing. Insert that one. Well, we're just going to have to deal with that. It's going to take us up pretty far north. Oh, well, I'd have to come back and fix it. If you need to go between the pages of your flight plan, by the way, notice your buttons seem to be reversed. Think of it like sticking your finger and going like this and dragging up. That's what's going to be doing the magic work here. And notice, by the way, notice continuities, nothing like that. You can see we're going for Albany, Canaan, Shiggy, then we're going to hit Stella, Molds, Decel, Searle, Motel, runway 24, and that's going to get us safe in the ground. So now that that has been programmed, if we go back to the init page and we go back to the second page, you'll notice that these things are now ready to rock. We can actually sit here and start kind of punching things in. If we're not sure about a particular detail, of course, we can program in our own pieces there, which is actually pretty good. So after this has all been preset, oh, there's our progress page. Oh, God, now watch out for the direct to button. What have I done? By the way, you can create a second flight plan. So that's something you need to do here. And we have all this stuff all ready to go. I'm not worried about it. I've done the calculations. It's 11.6 is our burn for this. I'm not worried about it too much. So then what we're going to do is we're going to go double check one last thing while we're over here. Of course, if you ever get lost, you can always go to the MCD menu. And again, you can bounce between the different components quickly. 330 looks good, looks good, looks good. Flight level looks good. That looks good to me. Again, if I'm worried about this, I can come in here and I can actually punch this in. I can do like 11.6. We can come over here, and I think it's 0052. It helps if you actually type things correctly. I think that's roughly correct. And again, it's not going to let us enter that value. This is a calculated value because it is not going to be a blue one. So just something you got to watch out for when you're kind of doing those elements. All right, so this is good to go. That's good to go. Block is 53. We have plenty of fuel. I'm not going to worry about it. Now I'm going to head to the perf button. Now, the perf is where you're going to be able to select the takeoff performance of our aircraft here. So we have a couple different values we have. We have our V1, our VR, and our V2. This is where we're going to start pulling the nose up. This is we're going to think about making our decisions, pull the nose up, get into the air, sort of a thing like that. Now, you'll notice if I click on the buttons next to them, it pre-populates all these options for us. So you can see we have the 137, the 144, the 148. All those values are for us. Now, there's something you got to watch out for here. And if you actually come down here, you're going to notice that this is assuming a specific flap setting. We always take off with flaps 1.5, I like to kind of call it. But what we can do is we can actually change which mode we want to do if we're silly people. Now, the neat thing here that we have is that we can actually set the flex temperature if we want to reduce our power for takeoff. Since we're using a runway 10, for example, we could tell the engines, hey, my temperature is actually 45 degrees, and it actually will cut down the power of our engine, saving a little bit of wear and tear. Now, if you're a bad person, of course, you can do something really awful and do something like this, in which case... yeah, we're going to be moving pretty quick there, but we're not going to worry about that too much. We don't have any of our derating pages. And again, playing with the pages here, there's going to be nothing to see. Now, below this, you're going to see a button that says Next Phase. Now, notice this says Takeoff. Now, press Next Phase, and this is going to give us our climb options. One of the things you probably notice here is it says the word Selected. Now, why does it say Selected? Well, do you remember when we were goofing off a minute ago with the MCP up here and we pushed all these buttons? Well, unfortunately, in doing all that, we basically set ourselves up in a situation where we can't control all the different options that we basically dialed in. Instead of being managed, we are currently going to be set to selected. Now, if I come up here and I basically click all these buttons back in, whoops, we actually wanted 33. Thank you for that. Let's push that back in. See how everything went back to this little dot here to say that it's computed? Now, if I come down here, you'll notice it says managed, which now means the FMS is going to be doing all these calculations for us. Now, if we had to, we could actually come up here, if we want to be, I don't know, to be silly kind of a thing, we could set in a selected speed, which now means that this aircraft would maintain it for that particular point. Again, that's just one of those little things that you can do should you need to. And obviously, like, why is 158 so low? Well, it's because we're taking off, and that's how fast we go and take off. We don't climb immediately to 48. We have to get to that speed. Now, going over here, you have all your information as far as your cruise. We can set a specific selected speed if we choose to do so. Again, there's nothing stopping us at any point in the trip from just pulling this back out, so we can go set it to whatever speed we actually need it to be. Next is going to be our descent. We're not going to bother that at all. You can see 248 has been our managed speed selection. If, again, we can come up here at any time, say, actually, I want to do 250. Completely up to you. Like I said, it does not matter kind of a thing as far as that goes. Going to our next phase, again, you have our approach. The approach, none of this is going to make any difference to us at this time because we're not really in a position where we can actually land. One key thing you want to know about this, by the way, is you have to decide whether or not you want it full or you want to use configuration 3. For us, it's going to be configuration 3, which is no big deal. We'll deal with that about 2 videos from now, so don't worry about that too much. Once this is all set, usually what I do is I come over here and press the prog button, which is my handy-dandy little progress page, and that's actually pretty good to go. Now, it's worth noting at this point, if we actually stick our heads up a little bit, that these displays will actually show you everything we need to see for our actual journey. So if I actually come over here to the planning mode, one of the things I really get a kick out of, and we get this on the Boeing as well, is if you can kind of do this with your screen, you can say, I can't see, what do I do? What do I do? Hold down the right Alt key, left click on the screen. Now you're like, what did you do? Ta-da! You can see now very clearly that this now takes up a huge chunk of the screen. Now, the reason this is awesome is if I go down to the flight plan page, I can actually skip through the flight plan itself, and you can see each one of the components of the flight plan, and you can check visually to make sure everything makes sense. So if I actually, whoa, it's getting a little tricky to see here. That's the sound it should make. By the way, did I mention Albany is a little out of the way? It's a little out of the way. But again, for our purposes, it's not going to make that much of a difference. So you can see here, I can actually inspect each one of my components in my journey here. And you can actually pop out any of these screens. So if you want to be really, really silly, you could actually take this screen like I do, and I stick it on my third monitor so you can actually have it in front of you. And again, that's just a fantastic little trick there that works really, really well for anything in Microsoft Flight Simulator, which again, I wish all flight simulators had that feature because I find that really, really, really cool. All right, so we're good to go. Our FMS is programmed. Oh, normally you'd put your first altitude in here. I'm just going right up to cruise altitude today because that's as high as I need to go. Again, I don't have to change that. Our next video, what we're going to do is we're going to get this sucker started up. We're going to go take it over to the runway. We're going to get airborne, get up to a cruise, and then our final video, we'll actually put this thing back on the ground, which should be pretty good. Enjoy.